Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our regular weekly show publishes on Tuesday mornings, but today we're starting something new. We're calling it Michigan Man Extra. We don't have a regular schedule, but in addition to the weekly show, from time to time, we'll publish this extra edition when we have something to say or there's a guest Michigan football fans will find interesting. Today we launch Michigan Man Extra with special guest Jonh U Bacon. John's new book, Endzone, The Rise, Fall, and Return of Michigan Football, was released on September 1st. This week it debuted at number 6 on the New York Times bestsellers list. I got my copy last week and finished it in just 2 days. If you love Michigan football, and I know you do, then get yourself or a friend a copy of this book. Last fall was pure chaos for Michigan football and its fans. We lived it, we remember. But little did we know what was going on behind the scenes as the season spiraled out of control, both on the field and off. Jonh U Bacon has done an amazing job of filling in the blanks for us, taking us behind the scenes and in great detail explaining how things went so wrong so quickly for Michigan football. Jonh U Bacon joins me next here on the Michigan Man Extra on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. With us on our Michigan Man Extra segment this week is a gentleman we are all familiar with, author Jonh U Bacon, here to talk to us about his wonderful new book, Endzone, The Rise, Fall, and Return of Michigan Football. John, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, Mike. Great to be back.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, I got my hands on a copy last week. Didn't get a thing done over the weekend. What a great read it was.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I will say I'm gratified that Michigan fans are tearing through, mostly Michigan fans, tearing through a 460-page book in a few days, like you. And another argument I've won with the publishers out in New York who have a hard time believing that football fans will read a book that long with so few photos and all the big words. I know, Mike, I promise you, that quickly. So you've once again vindicated me and my belief in the Michigan fan base.
Well, John, when you put together your book proposal last fall, you mentioned that you had some good ideas for a book on Michigan football, but when you started to do your research and your interviews, you had no idea how things were going to unfold in the coming weeks and months, did you?
That's exactly right. In fact, Mike, an editor out in New York named Ben Adams, a very good one, was talking to a friend of mine, Dave Larabelle, former agent of mine. We're having breakfast together in New York, and he had said, hey, Ben wants to know if he's going to write a book about Michigan football, another one. about this team this season. And at that point, Mike, it was early October. Michigan was either 2-3 or 2-4. It was on the heels of the Shane Moore situation. So, as you might imagine, the mood was not very good in Ann Arbor at that point. And I said, not only do I not want to write that book, I don't think I'd want to read that book. So I don't know how we could get a book out of that. He said, no, the off-the-field stuff you're already writing about for Yahoo and Wall Street Journal and so on, about the ticket prices, the students, all that other stuff. And I said, well, maybe it could be a book. So we started doing a proposal in mid-October. By the time I finished in early December, working on and off, what happened? Well, Dave Brennan had resigned. Brady Hoke had been fired. Jim Hackett had been hired as the interim AD, and he was clearly on the heels of Jim Harbaugh himself. And at that point, I'm thinking, yes, we could have a book here. And December 23rd, we signed the contract, and I worked 209 straight days till July 18th to get it done. And during those interviews, as you say, even when we knew the basic outline of the story, by doing over 100 interviews with people from the players to the president, man, I learned a whole heck of a lot, and I think you might have as well by carrying through that book the way you did. And it really is a very dramatic story, most of it, of course, off the field.
The first few chapters, if you read that, you review Charles Baird, Fielding Yost, Fritz Chrysler, Don Cannon, Bo Schembech, so many others that built the foundation and tradition of excellence. And if you stop there, you would say, wow, what could possibly go wrong, and what could go wrong so fast? That's
about right. And I got to tell you also, when Dave Brennan was named the AD in 2010, like almost everybody else, I thought that was going to be a very good choice and work out very well for Michigan. I had all the signs of it. He had been, a player for Bo, of course. He's raised in the tradition of Bo Schembech with Michigan football. A highly successful CEO at both Velasquez and Domino's Pizza, two Fortune 500 companies. And, of course, a regent from 1998 to 2006. And by all accounts, Mike, and you've already read the book, the other regents, the Democrats, the Republicans, the provosts, the deans, give Dave incredibly high marks as a regent for being very savvy, being above the fray, not engaging in petty party politics and all this stuff, and being a great not just manager but a supervisor, trying not to micromanage. So given all that, I think everybody was in Dave's corner when he took the job.
Looking at Dave's past, coming from Velasquez, being very successful, coming from Domino's, and I know there are a lot of opinions on what happened at Domino's, and you cover that very well in the book. We had every reason to think that, hey, he's a Michigan guy. He was one of Bo's friends, close to Bo, that, hey, we had our guy. But you made an analogy early in the book. Before the Johnstown floods, before Katrina, there were signs, there were cracks, there were warnings. At what point after Dave Brandon became athletic director did it become apparent he had a different way of doing things and a different vision?
I think it became apparent layer by layer. And as you say, from the Katrina analogy, the idea was that, obviously the historic hurricane is the problem, no question about that. But it would not have been that big a problem if they had listened to the newspaper, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, who said 5 years earlier or so, did a big report saying we're not ready for the next historic hurricane, which is bound to happen sooner or later. The levees, the plans in place, all the backup systems were not sufficient, and they warned about this. And that's kind of what happened to Michigan, is layer by layer these safeguards were removed, and usually nobody saw or noticed this. But the first one, in my opinion, is when he inherits about 250 employees under Bill Martin, and 143 of those are gone within 4 years. And there's always some deadwood in any organization. You need some turnover and so on. But when you turn over half, more than half of the folks who built what is clearly a very strong athletic department that he inherited, you've lost a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of skill, including guys like Bruce Motti and Dave Abloff weren't even let go, but they were pushed aside. Right there you lost around, 53 years of PR experience. That mattered when you get to Shane Morris.
Well, it certainly did. And with Dave Brandon, you, I think, go out of your way to be very fair to Dave. And like anything in life, there's the good and the bad. He did so many good things for the university, loved the athletes and the university. No one questions that. Very complicated man.
That is a fair analysis. Look, he's not evil. He's a bit of a tragic figure. He's a flawed human being like we all are. And it so happened that his strengths and his flaws were related, and the flaws, of course, resulted in some a very unhappy final year. But you are right. I'm very glad to hear you say that. That, look, his love for Michigan is utterly boundless, and he's proven that in countless ways. The Regents don't get paid. That's a headache you bring on yourself for nothing. And he did a great job at that. He has given millions of dollars to the hospital, to the School of Education, to the athletic department, and elsewhere in the university. And you say about the student athletes, I don't think any AD in the history of Michigan, and they've all been good with the student athletes in my opinion, but Dave was phenomenal, and it's proven probably best the Will Hogrup story, why he stayed with him with no real upside for Dave Brandon and a whole lot of downside if Will Hogrup screwed up. And Will is a big believer in Dave Brandon, and not without reason. At the football bust, and I know you're there, Will Hogrup gets up there and says, Michigan football saved my life. Thank you, Dave Brandon. That's something. You cannot ignore this. Having said that, of course, the other flaws, I think misunderstanding the mission, that the student athletes were your only constituency or the main one. You've got about 7 or 8 constituencies when you are an AD at Michigan, and that's why the job is so doggone hard. You've got student athletes, you've got coaches, you've got the students on campus, you've got the alumni, you've got the fans, you've got the lettermen, you've got the faculty, you've got the regents. Good luck. That is not an easy job for anybody, but it gets harder when you don't see the rest of those guys as people you need to answer to. And I think that's what happened in Dave's case.
Well, John, you chronicle it so well that Dave started to lose support group by group, layer by layer. There were the Letterman, Bose guys, then the Lloyd's guys, and then players after that. I think the thing that jumped out at me, though, and was so interesting, is when the students, with the whole ticket fiasco, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but Michael Prop.
Michael Proppy and Bobby Dishel. And trust me, I don't know how to pronounce those names either, so don't worry. You're in fine company.
But that is just incredible. You mentioned in the book that most Michigan students, until that point, probably didn't even pay attention to student government, or not like they should. But during this the ticket fiasco, Bobby Dishel and Michael Proppy got their attention.
Yeah, these guys are two of the unsung heroes of the story. And I know a bit of this while it was going on, but very little until you sit down and spend 5 hours at Ashley's, it turns out. Some jobs are harder than others, Mike, certain days, but we had a few beers at Ashley's, and they told me the story, and we followed up many times. But these are two very smart guys, and if you're a Michigan alum, you can feel proud of what Michigan is producing in terms of graduates. Michael Proppy's background is in stats in the Ross School of Business, and Bobby Dishel is at the Ford School of Public Policy. They're both graduates now and doing great work out in the world. But they were foisted in the role of defending the students when no one else would, because the general admission policy, which was designed, in fairness to Dave Brandon, to get the students to the stadium and get them there on time, two problems they were having during the 2011-2012 seasons. But how they went about it was really counterproductive. They, without any warning, any consultation, any discussions, they announced overnight, literally, that the general admission policy would rescind the decades-old policy of reserved seats for students like everyone else. So you start as a freshman year under the scoreboard in the end zone, and by your senior year, you're in the front row on the 30-yard line. And we, of course, consider this in Michigan a rite of passage, if not, in fact, a birthright in some ways. So obviously the students were very upset about this. They figured out who their student government leaders were, started hammering them with emails, and these guys took action. And based on their backgrounds in stats and government, they did a phenomenal job at faculty meetings, at regents meetings, basically tearing apart the logic, statistically, behind the athletic department's program, proving a few things. One, that it was deeply unpopular with the students, and they had these great scientific surveys to prove it, and they knew how to do that stuff. When 80% say it's god-awful, you got a problem. All right, that's one thing. But as Proppy said, if they didn't like it, but more of them showed up, more of them showed up on time, you can have a fair debate about, cost-benefit analysis. But he said they were able to prove by teasing out start times. All right, what about start times at 12 o'clock or 3:30 or 8 o'clock, apples to apples? Let's compare those games. By doing that, they discovered that the policy resulted in fewer students showing up and fewer students showing up on time. So, as Proppy said, look, everyone hates it, and it doesn't work. So what are we debating? And he had a very good point.
Our guest here on our Michigan Game Day Extra today is author Jonh U Bacon, and we're discussing his incredible book, Endzone, The Rise, Fall, and Return of Michigan Football, which I suggest all Michigan fans, if you don't have it already, get a copy of it. It is a fast read. John, as far as a tipping point for Dave Brandon, the Shane Morris incident, that whole fiasco with the concussion or the headache, as some of the medical folks described it, was that really the beginning of the end for Dave?
I think that it was. I think that unlike other situations we've seen where you know that is, the last point, for many folks it was like 1,000 paper cuts, and different people got off the Brandon bandwagon at different times, and we kind of outlined basically 10 or 12 possibilities. But for almost everybody, after the Shane Morris incident, you are now fighting to save your job. The boat is now taking on water. You're not just getting wobbly. You got a real problem there. And I will say, and the book makes this very clear, in Brandon's last month in the job, we did not know that at the time, of course, it was going to be his last month, but in October of 2014, he did a lot of things that he never did before that, and that was reach out to the student government leaders, reach out to the Michigan Daily. He visited the Michigan Daily for the first time in his tenure, start building bridges with some of the media, which is a little late in the process, but it was a good idea. Reach out, go to meetings for the Alumni Association, talk to faculty members. I'm telling you right now, Mike, if that guy had been the AD in 2010, he would still be the AD, and I think a damn good one. But it was too little too late, and that of course all went under with the emails.
Oh, absolutely. And that you go into such great detail in the book. There's so much to cover in this book, John. We want our listeners to, of course, if you haven't read it, we don't want to give too much away. But when you alienate people, as you explained so well in that book, when it got to the point of having to respond to that email fiasco and to the Shane Morris concussion, Bruce Motti and Dave Abloff were nowhere to be found, were they?
That's exactly right. And as Bill Martin explains, and I know Don Cannon would surely agree with this, in a crisis, nobody was better than Bruce Motti. And we got some scenes in there. We proved it with how he handled the Chris Webber situation back in 1993, when, of course, Chris Webber called the timeout Michigan did not have, and he's devastated in the North Carolina NCAA final game. And it was Bruce's idea, saying, Chris, we have to get you up there in front of the press. We got to do it tonight. I know it's miserable. I know you're crying. There's no fun. I'll get you off there, I promise, in 5 minutes, but you got to do it now, or else it's going to dog you the rest of your life. And Perry Watson, of course, agreed with Bruce. They got him up there. He was crying on the podium, and he got it done. And the next night at a big national banquet, Chris Webber got the standing ovation. That's how Bruce Motti does it. It's the old line, Mike, you've heard me say from Canham countless times, one of the smartest things I've ever heard: do not turn a one-day story into a two-day story. And that's Don Canham, of course, and that was Bruce Motti. But when this thing happens, the Shane Morris situation, Bruce Motti's been pushed aside. Dave Abloff has been pushed aside for the first time in 241 games. Abloff does not have the earpiece with the TV feed, which lets you know when you're in trouble, from the national sportscaster. Pete Scorch, who had been hired a year earlier from the Pistons, he'd been fired that Tuesday before the game, and you put in place somebody who, God bless her, did not want the job. She's in development in athletics, but she agreed to do it as a good soldier, but no training, no experience. And, what can go wrong, right? So they did not even realize they had a PR problem until Sunday night. And by then, of course, the flames are getting pretty high.
Well, and then, of course, the end was near, and enter Jim Hackett. And I think one of the most fascinating pieces in that book was that President Schlissel really had two brief conversations with Jim Hackett before he asked Jim if he would like to help, and it happened so quickly.
It did happen quickly, and give President Schlissel high points for making as we say, that's a big boy decision. You just got off the phone Wednesday night, October 29th, with Dave Brandon, who has offered his resignation. This is a day and a half after the emails have come out. And Schlissel accepts this, and then his next phone call is to Jim Hackett. And as you say, Mike, he had talked to Hackett just 1 month earlier for the first time on the phone, never met in person. Jim's got a great reputation, of course. He's on the board of the Ford School, on the board of Ford Motor Company, all this smart stuff. Nonetheless, you don't know that much about the guy, so he calls him up and says, look, Jim, I cannot tell you what's happened tonight, but I can tell you, if the position of athletic director opens up, would you accept interim athletic director here at Michigan? And Hackett says, I got to ask my wife about that. I'll call you right back. So he hangs up, and talks to his wife, Kathy. Kathy says, I will support you if you want to do it. Now the question is, does he want to do it? So he calls up a friend of his, a headhunter, whose job is to, amongst others, get people to work in the president's cabinet in D.C., which is not an easy job because the guys you're after are national stars. They're multimillionaires. They got very good jobs. And you're asking them to make $250,000 and get dumped on from people they don't even know. So that's not a very appealing prospect. But his closing line always is, hey, some jobs are for God and country. And then he turns that to Hackett and says, Jim, for you, Michigan is that job. And Hackett says, you're right, that's all I got to hear. Hangs up, sends President Schlissel a text saying, I'm in, and that's it. So you're right, that is a very quick turnaround. And give Schlissel credit, he got the right guy, proven a month later.
And Mr. Hackett had a big decision to make very quickly, whether to retain Coach Hoke or not, and you detail so well how that was an agonizing decision for him to make. But when he met with Brady, told him what was going to happen. I know people that read the book are going to find poignant moments or moments that jump out at them, but I was always a big fan of Coach Brady Hoke. How he left was handled so well by Mr. Hackett, but the one scene that you paint so well in the book, John, is when Mr. Hackett went to talk to the team and tell them Coach Hoke would not be back, and Coach Hoke was there, and the silence in the room, and then Justice Hayes standing up, walking up to Brady, giving him the big hug, and then the rest of the team doing the same. That was, to me, a chilling example.
It was, and clearly, Mike, you've read this 450-page book very carefully, my friend, because that's a brief but I think poignant scene, which shows probably more than anything else I could have told the readers. And we've got a lot in there from Brady Hoke, of course, and his many good deeds behind the scenes for the players, why the players loved him. But that's the whole thing. Dead silence. Justice Hayes gets up, walks up, gives Hoke a huge bear hug, and before you know it, everybody is in line to give Hoke a huge bear hug. The players did love the guy. And as you said, Hackett took no pleasure in that. It was not fun.
Well, in closing, John, there's so much again. This is such a great read for Michigan fans. So well done in such a very short period of time. We're at the end. And, of course, Jim Harbaugh. We all know what's happened since the day that Jim Hackett brought Jim Harbaugh home against what many people thought were against all odds, that he'd never leave the NFL. Little did we know how receptive Jim Harbaugh was going to be.
Well, as we said about Hackett, we can say about Harbaugh. Some jobs are for God and country. For Jim Harbaugh, Michigan is also it. And although, as he said to me about his salary, hey, look, man, do not put me on the same dance floor as Mother Teresa. I'm making $5 million. Not exactly Michael Val poverty, throw on top of that $2 million bonus and so on. But I said, hey, look, the NFL would have paid you more. I know this. It's substantially more. It's all talk until you get a contract offer, but that was the word in the street anyway. And he said, okay, yeah, probably so. I said, I did not wait around for offers for the NFL teams, and he did not. He said, I did not come to Michigan because I thought they'd pay me the most. But how he made his decision was he called his dad, Jack Harbaugh, a few days earlier and said, well, what do you think? And his dad says, Jim, follow your heart. And Jim turns to me and says, so that is what I did. And that, to me, for all the ups and downs of the last 4 or 5 years, is one of the most inspiring parts of the story, no matter what team you cheer for, not just Michigan, but to see people act in the goodness of an institution they love, not for self-interest, not for monetary gain, taking less money in the case of Hackett and Harbaugh. And a lot of heroes, like you said, the student government leaders, the Letterman, the regents, all these people came up and did the right thing for no credit at some risk. And you don't see that very often anymore, I don't think, in American public life. And this, to me, is how an institution can correct itself when people have their heart in the right place. And that, for me, finally, Mike, I've got a happy ending.
Amen. The book is called Endzone, The Rise, Fall, and Return of Michigan Football. Michigan or college football fans, if you haven't picked up a copy yet, I know you can get it at Amazon. Where else can you get this, John?
Anywhere, I believe, around. They got big old displays at Barnes & Nobles right now. You can get it in Ann Arbor at Nicola's or Literati, around the state at Schuler's Books in Lansing and Grand Rapids. And I can tell you, as of last night, we just learned that this coming Sunday, tomorrow for you, of course, it's going to be a New York Times bestseller, number 6 on the list. So thank you, Michigan fans.
Well, it's a great book, a quick read, even though it's 450 pages for any Michigan football fanatic. Get a copy. Our guest on the show today has been the author, Jonh U Bacon. John, thanks for your time today. Look forward to our next visit.
Mike, definitely a pleasure. Come back anytime.
Thanks to Jonh U Bacon for being my guest here on our first Michigan Man Extra. Endzone, the rise, fall, and return of Michigan football, is available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and just about anywhere good books are sold. Get a copy. It's a great read. Our next Michigan Man Extra will come out in about 2 weeks. My guest will be Kelly Lytle, son of Michigan great Rob Lytle. Rob will officially be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in December. The Michigan Athletic Department will officially honor him prior to the BYU game. Rob's family, friends, and many former teammates will be in attendance for that game. As many of you know, Kelly authored a book that came out earlier this year, To Dad from Kelly, and that too is a great read. I recommend it to Michigan fans, young and old. It is available from Amazon and can be picked up at the Emden. So if you don't have a copy, stop by one of the Emden locations around the stadium before or after the game. If they don't have it there in stock, I'm sure they can order it for you. I hope you've enjoyed our first edition of the Michigan Man Extra. Don't forget to check out one of our free show apps. For Apple users, the app is available in the iTunes Store. Just do a search for The Michigan Man. For Android tabs and phones, the app is in the Google Play Store. And for Windows users, we are in the Windows 8 App Store. It's the quick, easy, and free way to keep up on Michigan athletics. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until next time, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!